Most high-performing people don't need more discipline. We can get things done. We don't need more information. We are bombarded with information. And most people certainly don't need more pressure put on them. What we need is to give ourselves permission to choose ourselves, to matter in our own lives. Hi, I'm Meredith Christo, and I'm glad you're here. In my first podcast, I talked about the day I walked away from a 25-year corporate career without another job lined up, and about the clarity and alignment I felt, and the sense that I wasn't leaving something, I was actually arriving into something new. Sometimes we have these visions that we're going to just wake up one day and change our lives completely. But most of the time, a big decision like that isn't spontaneous. For me, it actually started years before I resigned. It was more of a slow evolution of my self identity that started when I decided to do something meaningful for myself. This was something that it mattered to me, independent of everything else. Like a lot of people, I had spent most of my adult life directing my energy outward toward performance, responsibility, achievement that lived in boardrooms and promotions, and choosing something big that I wanted to do for myself felt selfish at first, but I realized that it wasn't selfish, it was actually formative, and it was for a form of permission I was giving to myself. And here is something that I have learned. Most high-performing people don't need more discipline. We can get things done. We don't need more information. We are bombarded with information. And most people certainly don't need more pressure put on them. What we need is to give ourselves permission to choose ourselves, to matter in our own lives, permission to slow down and be intentional, permission to stop living reactively and start living by design, and permission to become the best versions of ourselves. The idea of granting yourself permission, and I want to be very clear that I'm talking about self permission, not permission from others in the outside world, but this idea of granting yourself permission has shaped everything that I'm building now. When I stopped being only the roles that I was filling and became the person making the choices about my life, I was able to invest effort in something that I chose, that wasn't assigned to me or wasn't part of some corporation strategic plan. And this subtle shift became a structural part of my life and the beginning of me intentionally designing my life. And really at first, nothing really changed. I still showed up to work, I still did my job, I still performed at a high level. But what's interesting is when that shift started happening, it didn't pull me away from my career right away. It actually elevated it. So that year I was actually leading one of the biggest projects of my career. It ended up being described as one of the most significant initiatives our Indiana Health Plan had taken on in decades. And I approached this project differently. I wasn't second guessing myself. I wasn't holding myself back in meetings. I was really thinking intentionally about how I wanted to show up to each and every meeting, not just about what I needed to get done. And there was a level of presence and ownership that had been elevated. And, it showed. It showed in my performance. It became one of the most successful seasons of my career. At the same time, I'd committed to something completely separate from my job, something that was mine. And that path led me to step onto a bodybuilding stage for the very first time. And I ended up winning my first competition. And 2 weeks later, I won the state title. Coincidentally, winning that title came at the same time as getting a huge contract signed for this work project. And I remember thinking and even telling George that winning that state title felt more fulfilling than bringing that, over a year plus long work project across the finish line. And that was really a turning point for me, and not because of the title, but because of what it revealed. And it really showed me that I wasn't just capable of performing at a high level in my career. I was capable of building something meaningful outside of it as well. And that really changed how I saw everything. And once you see something like that, you can't really unsee it. But you also don't wake up the next day and quit your job. I certainly didn't. I stayed for several more years. But from that point on, I wasn't living inside my career. I was living beyond it. And that's an important distinction. I really don't think that most people hate the life that they've built. I think they're deeply grateful for it. I think a lot of people are proud of the life they've created and the person who's created it. But we also aren't meant to stop growing. And eventually we discover that the person who's built the life we're in isn't the final version of who we are. We're becoming larger than the life container that we've built. And if that's where you are today, I don't want you to hear that this is a reason to, blow up your life. I want you to hear it as an invitation to become curious. Start asking yourself questions. Ask yourself, what is one meaningful thing I could choose for myself? Because these big life decisions normally aren't the beginning, they're the result. They're the visible expression of an identity that's been evolving for years. It's not a big spontaneous leap, it's an evolution that starts with choosing something for yourself. So if this episode resonates with you, subscribe, like, share it, comment. I will see you in the next episode.